Hello, everybody. Welcome to the feed today. Gosh, it's been interesting. Just as we were getting ready to go live, we had a little power outage, and all of the stuff we had loaded up went away. We had to reschedule everything, and so the streaming service requires us to have at least 10 minutes notice. And so here we are at long last. This kind of talks about interviews. If you think that something might go wrong at the worst possible time, it will, and it usually will involve the interview process. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're glad you're with us. Because we're late starting, I won't have too many announcements other than to say, if you don't know who I am, I'm John Self. For 27 years, I was an executive recruiter. I worked primarily in healthcare. I worked all over the world, which was an incredible experience. I started off as a newspaper reporter, a crime writer, an investigative reporter, so I know a lot about interviewing. In my search practice, I probably interviewed over 9,000 people in my career. So I know a little bit about interviewing, and I can tell you that a lot of people show up unprepared, and that is your opportunity for success. So let's pick up where we left off from last week. Last week, we gave you a lot of the foundational elements of what happens with an interview, what's problematic with an interview. Today, we're going to talk about the interview style, and we're going to be sure that everything's working here. And we're going to talk about interview tactics for each type of interview. So let's roll. Now, this is really important. Your attitude, your preparation, and your confidence are critical. I'm telling you, this is something that is just so problematic for so many people. They show up and they think they're just there to answer questions. They're not confident. They're nervous. And we have a way to help you overcome that. And we can talk about that at the end of this presentation. Well, the job interview for some people is like scaling the mountain, okay? It's the interview, the place where jobs are really won or lost. They're not going to be won or lost with your resume. That just gets you to the table. And most managers and executives struggle with this form of communication. It is the most unique, most challenging form of communication, because today, in a very competitive environment where we now have all of these people for jobs being swept in from LinkedIn by computer scanners, instead of having maybe 5 or 6 people in the search, you may have 500 or 600 people that the computer is evaluating for performance. So if you get to the table, you cannot just show up and answer questions. You've got to tell your story in a compelling manner. You have to be able to use stories. You have to be able to communicate your value, and it has to be in a compelling manner. I would say in my 27 years, of all the 9,000 plus people I interviewed, 20% were exceptional, most were average. There is an opportunity for you. That doesn't mean you have to be exceptional. It means you just have to be better than average. What's the old joke about the old O.J. Simpson and Merlin Olsen, a former L.A. Rams great NFL lineman, and a bear came into the camp, and O.J. started putting on his tennis shoes. And Olsen said, who was a big, husky, 250-pound guy, said, "You can't outrun that bear." And Simpson, true to form, said, "All I have to do is outrun you." Well, all you have to do is outrun the people who show up and don't prepare, and we're going to teach you how to get prepared. Okay, job seekers don't understand their value, and so they're not really focused. And that's really something we talked about last week, so you can go look at that first part 1 if you missed it. It's on YouTube at Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. That presentation is on YouTube in the live tab. Listen, a lot of people, when they say, "Oh, I'm prepared," what they've done is superficial homework on the prospective employer. They have poor preparation. They are not confident. They're nervous. And most importantly, they are not self-aware. They do not use stories to sell their values. And at the end of the day, they don't close the deal. Close the deal? That sounds like I have to sell. Yes, you do. But why? Because the people you're competing against, even the average people, are trying to sell themselves. Now, there are tactics and worksheets that can help you ace the interview. It's really, I know it sounds complicated, but it's really not rocket science. And so I want you to know that you can get better. Research and preparation, including rehearsal, will help you immeasurably. Now, in order to succeed, you must do the work. There are very, very, very few natural interviewers. Let's talk about the various types of interview. Now, the first one we talk about all the time when we talk about how the resume process has changed. That's your first interview. So when you're submitting a resume, it's got to be spot on, focused on the job you are going after. It does not have to be, it is not something that you can just do a generic resume and send it in. It's got to be spot on, and it's got to have keywords and key phrases that they used in the job summary. Otherwise, the computer will never pick you up. Okay, so that's your first one. And, there are other interviews we'll talk about in just a minute, but that's the first one. We're not going to spend much time today. There's the telephone interview, there's the video interview, there's the site and panel interviews. So we're going to have to talk about some tactics for each interview and provide you with some actionable steps to improve your performance. Now, let's talk about the telephone interview. It's the first challenge. If you get past all the computers, God love you, you really want to then ace it, because you don't want to go through all that anguish and all that rejection, finally get to the interview table and just be average, not be prepared. We can help you get prepared. Okay, now this telephone interview is typically used for the initial screening of applicants selected for consideration. And that may be 10 or 12, it may be 20. And at this point, At most searches, your knowledge of the job is really kind of limited. You might have read the job summary. Those things may have a lot of keywords in it, but they don't have any depth or scope to really what's going on. So you have to do your own research. At this point, part of your research process is asking questions during interviews. And at this point, you haven't had an interview, so you're kind of working on limited knowledge. These things are usually pretty short in length. They're maybe 20 to 40 minutes. Sometimes they'll go over. Just because they go over, do not think, oh, golly, that means that I am really in good shape and I really got a shot at this. It just means that the recruiter was enjoying the conversation. And so let's see, we're locking up again here with the power fluctuating. So that doesn't mean anything. Don't read anything into that. It's better to be prepared. It's better to be specific. It's better to give very tight answers, because going over on your part's not going to help you, and it doesn't necessarily even mean much in terms of future consideration. Okay? You're not, one of the problems with the telephone is you're unable to judge the recruiter's reactions to your answers. You're kind of flying blind, and that's what makes it hard. So here's some tactics you can use for that. First of all, review their LinkedIn profile to see where they went to school, see where they worked before, to see if they worked with anybody that you may know. If it's the recruiter, maybe not. But if it's an executive that you're interviewing with on the screening, it may be. Print a photo of the person doing the calling, and then talk to that photo when you're engaging them. In the radio days, when I started out early on in my news career, I did a little radio news kind of on the part-time, just because I loved radio. This was in the late 60s, where top 40 radio and local radio was really a big deal. And so I would do some news reporting for them. And one of the things that you always were told on radio is talk to the microphone as if it's a person. And the really good announcers, the really good people, they could have be talking to 400,000 or 500,000, 1 million people at a time, but everybody felt like they were talking to them, and that's the real secret. So to help you with that kind of transition, you're not a radio person, you don't have a lot of experience at that, talk to the picture. That'll help you. Be prepared. Tell me about yourself. That's a question that's so common. You may get it during the telephone interview. You got to stay within 60 to 90 seconds. That's right from your value brand statement. If you don't have a value brand statement, you can't be focused, and you're not going to be able to give a bang up home run answer like that. If you start off with a really good tight answer that really is catchy and engaging, you have a chance to keep moving. Be careful not to ramble. Again, in the telephone, you absolutely have to be focused. Okay, now here are some things that are not a good idea. You never, ever, ever, ever do a job interview while you're driving, while you're drinking. Interviewing while drinking is never a good idea. You don't want to do it at airports or Starbucks where there's a lot of background noise. You need to plan ahead. Finding a job is really important. It can't be, I can just do it this. No, you can't. You absolutely have to be very focused. You can't be in a car. Now, if you're on a vacation island and they want to talk to you right away and they won't wait for you to get back to the mainland, and the highest part of the island where you can get a decent cell signal is at the top of the hill, and you have to drive up there with your car. Try to have a tripod and get out and do it that way. Or stay in the car, but be sure it's a real close-up picture of your face, and explain, I'm on vacation, I'm on an island off the coast of it, off the coast of North Carolina, the coast of Florida, whatever, and we don't have very good cell coverage here. I apologize. And so I'm in my car at the highest point. If there's a public library or someplace where they have Wi-Fi, you can connect that way. Okay, now the other thing you need to do is dress as if everyone can see you. Not in your pajamas, not in your smelly workout clothes, not laying on the floor, not in your hair rollers. Why? Because if you're dressed up like you're going to be seen on video or in their presence, you're going to do a better job. You're going to be more focused. You're going to be more attentive. You're going to be more self-aware. Now, be careful that you don't, you do not want to use a cell phone that's running low on battery. I'm telling you, a drop call because you ran out of battery is a really killer. That's a buzzkill and a half for a recruiter. Don't do that. Okay, think ahead, be responsible. You may be competing against 50 or 100 people. Why would you just be kind of slapdash about it? So be very, 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 very careful. Drop calls are a killer. And you want to be very, very careful about some other issues too. Now, lighting is really important. I use this picture. This is my studio, and where I do a lot of my coaching and I make my videos. And what you can see behind me is carefully manicured. Those are two big studio lights, so I can get good lighting. One of the big problems a lot of people have is they don't pay enough attention to the fact that this is television. It may be closed circuit, but it's still TV. You must respect the power and the threat of the camera and the video production values. Now, when we all started doing this in the pandemic, there was a lot of leeway. None of us knew what we were doing. Well, most of us didn't know what we were doing. And, so everybody kind of got a free pass. But 4 or 5, 6 months into this, the people that were really smart, they started getting good backgrounds. They started getting better microphones or better sound, better lighting. And it's really, really important. These are essential in a competitive interview process. Oh, John, it doesn't really matter as long as I give them good information. Yes, it does matter. It's like showing up to an interview in a wrinkled suit that hasn't been dry cleaned in 6 years and kind of smells bad. Okay. There's another interesting point here. Don Burr founded an airline back in the 80s called People's Express. He said, to the flying public, a dirty flip down tray means to the traveling public, you're not doing your engine maintenance properly. Okay. So if you don't have your framing up, if you don't have good lighting, if you don't look good when you come up and you and the computer recruiter, they're kind of synonymous these days. If you don't have that good initial impression, then that's what the recruiter is going to remember. Now, the first photo here on the left is a man who has a really strong backlight. Backlighting sucks up the camera and keeps your face from being visible. If you're African American, it's doubly problematic. So you must have good lighting. There's one guy that I worked with who was a really great, smart financial guy, but every time I came up, he looked just like that. Now that's someone else, but he looked just like that. What impression do you think the recruiter gets from that first photo? The next thing that's wrong is the bottom right. The woman there is talking. She has a headset on. That's something I don't agree with, but she has the screen tilted back so that her face is in full frame. The problem is we're looking up at her neck. That's the least flattering pose. You want the computer at eye level, as in the person at the bottom here. So buy a stand, or this person right here, you probably don't recognize her. That's MSNBC's Stephanie Ruhle. And during the pandemic, she did a lot of broadcasts for CNBC and MSNBC from her home. And she's in her hallway of her home. I think she's in New Jersey. This lamp there you see it's a halo lamp. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not moving over, probably not. But she has a halo lamp, and then her computer, her Apple computer, is stacked on a bunch of coffee table books. And now you know the purpose of coffee table books. But if you come on to a recruiter or a coach and you don't have it framed up, then shame on you. Because everybody else has gotten the memo, and they're trying to look as professional and as good as they can. Now, when you're working with a coach, sometimes you don't put on a coat and tie, and some days you're having bad days, but you get your framing done and keep it that way for every broadcast, because when you get in the habit of not doing it sometimes, it will come back to bite you. You want to be sure that you're framed well, that you're lit well, that you have good audio, and that you've got the best angle that really gives you a positive vibe. Now, the camera lens is going to distort you. The cameras that they're using on computers now. One more thing: if you have a Dell computer with the camera down low, right over the keyboard, nobody wants to see your image across a keyboard. There is a stand that you can buy to flip the screen back so that the camera is at eye level. Dell, they did that so they could have a real thin screen. right about the time we're going into video that's going to be with us forever, the Dell computer with the camera angle down by the keyboard is the biggest pile of garbage I've ever seen for people who have to have a multi-purpose laptop computer. Stay away from it. Okay, so the computer lens is going to distract. The cameras are better than ever before, but there's still distortion. So the old saying in TV is that the camera will add 10 pounds of weight and subtract 10+% of your energy. Okay, and people say, well, there's no scientific evidence. Well, they've done some studies, at least on the camera lens, and that tends to be true. And I met, there was a guy I worked with or knew in Houston, Dave Ward, who was the anchor at Channel 13's Cap City, the leading newscast in Houston, and we talked to each other all the time. I was the police reporter for the Houston Post, and we would run into each other. He looked kind of chuffy on the camera, but he was really tall and lean. He was a great guy, but camera really distorted him a little bit. Now, one of the things you do not want to do in an interview is look down at your notes, because even though you think you're just looking casually over there, see how it makes my head look like I'm really turning over? Look, here at the top, you see a picture, and there are 2 note cards, and you say, well, how do you do that? I mean, it's going to be blocking the camera. No, it doesn't. You tape them to each side of the green light. Incidentally, that green light, we all have to struggle with this. We all have to work at this, but the green light is the eye of the recruiter. Don't lose sight of that. So you tape your cards either side of the green light, and you put your notes. You can't have detail notes. You have reminder notes, okay? Don't look down either side. It's going to make you look distracted. Now, if you're really getting into this, you can use a teleprompter, which is the bottom picture, because I do so many videos, and I love doing them, and I love teaching, but some of the times, the course information, I need reminders. I'm great at sales. I'm great at coaching people. I'm great at teaching about interviews and job search, but I don't have the best memory for memorization. So a lot of people can do that really quickly. So I use a teleprompter. You know what that is? That's my iPad. The cost of that program, I think it's less than $20. Okay, let's talk about some other things. Go back real quick. You want to buy a decent light. The little tiny halo lights usually aren't going to produce enough light to really make you pop. You want enough light to make you pop. And you can get a portable halo light that's about that big around. They're a little bit more expensive, but look, the pandemic we went through is not the last one we're going to have in your lifetime. Hopefully mine, but they're out there, and there's some really serious viruses that the epidemiologists say that could jump to a human at any time. And I'm not going to go into that because some of it is pretty darn scary. But I will say this. You're not going to this is not going to be a one and done situation. If you're a manager and you're going to find out you're going to have multiple sites to manage, you're going to be using video to stay in touch with your people. And you've got to be professional, and you've got to set a high standard. So you might as well go on and invest in a good light. Now, the side interview. This is the Super Bowl of the job search. Now, let me say this. The video interview is critical, and you've got to master this. Absolutely quit screwing around with this and do what you have to do, because a lot of companies are not going to bring you on site. Now, at the executive level, that's just silly. That's wrong. That's bad recruiting. But for a manager or a director, I can understand. So you may not make the site interview. So your video interview may be your Super Bowl. And because the site interview is usually called the Super Bowl of the job search process. The competition is always intense. You're always probably interviewing against 3 or 4 people. So you got to bring your A game. And your A game is not showing up unprepared. Recruiters will tell you that's one of the biggest problems that they have had. It really is, one of the really big problems that people have. They are absolutely, the recruiters complain, people show up unprepared. And that's an opportunity for you. So I would really, really encourage you to be prepared and bring your A game. So here's your game prep, okay? Know your value. Be prepared. Do the homework, not just about reading the summary of the job search 2 or 3 times. That's not preparation. Do some other research about the organization. Look at who's going to be interviewing you. Look up their LinkedIn profiles. See if you have any common connections. See if they might have gone to a school that you went to, or been in a fraternity you might have been into, or sorority. And then look at their pictures and try to understand who they are, okay? And then start thinking about the questions you're going to be asked. That job summary may be brief, but it's going to give you a good idea. Plus, by the time you get to the site interview, you've probably gone through 2 to 3 other interviews. At this point, you should be making a list of all of the questions you've been asked, because you're going to hear some of those again. There's only about 72 questions or 80 questions that can be asked, and that's just if you're only asking behavior and values questions. There's a great book that's really good called Top Grading by Brad Smart. If you want to get that, it gives you really great insight into behavior and values questions and the process. Okay, but when you look at that job summary, you can break that summary down into 4 to 5 categories. Financial management, governance, working with your boss or working with a board, financial operations, meeting your budget, corporate, your human equity, your HR, that is job satisfaction, job turnover rate, hiring the right people, staying in budget. So those are categories you can break down. In each category, you have strengths and weaknesses. Write those down. And I absolutely think that that this is really, really something that's important for you to do, is write down in each category your strengths and your weaknesses, and be prepared for those weaknesses, because people ask them, and everybody says it's a dumb question, it shouldn't be asked. We can argue about it at another time, but they get asked a lot. So why wouldn't you be ready? Okay, so really, absolutely go through this and write down strengths and weaknesses for each category of every job, and then think about, okay, if I'm in this interview and I'm interviewing the person, what questions would I ask? And that will help you, identify some people that identify some questions that you might be prepared to answer. Okay, you may have had a screw up in your career. It happens. I know people who've been fired through no fault of their own. Sometimes they just they weren't trained properly, make a mistake, but they're still going to, still sack you on the street. So, you've got to be prepared. Hopefully they won't ask those questions, but if you've got a question you hope they don't ask, have a great answer, learn it and put it in your heart, so that when you give the answer, it's heartfelt. And they probably don't ask it, but you know what? You're going to be more confident because you're ready for the negative. Okay. So that's really, really important. So be prepared, do your homework, and then rehearse. And people say, oh man, I feel so silly standing in front of a window. It's standing in front of a mirror, excuse me. Well, let me tell you something. Some of the best speakers, and I'm certainly not in that category, but some of the best speakers who've been doing it for 10 or 15 years still rehearse their presentations. Presentations they may have given 3 or 4 times. They rehearse their presentations over and over again to figure out timing and how could they turn a phrase a little bit differently. They're always looking for ways to make the answer, to make the presentation better. Rehearsal will help you build confidence. And you know what? It's really important, because preparation breeds confidence. Confidence is the foundation of being self-aware. When you are self-aware, you're able to read the room, you're seeing people's reactions, you're more confident, your answers are flowing more freely. It's a great, powerful, just combination. It's a great, powerful formula. So I really encourage you to be prepared. Okay. Now, site visits, there's some risk and opportunities. Okay. Opportunities, be dressed, be well groomed, show up early, and then nail the interview and be charming and delightful. That's great. Why? Because employers tend to hire people they like and trust. Your appearance is critical. I had a board doing a search once in Victoria, Texas. Great city, great board, great organization, really well-intentioned people. But there were a couple of women on the board who had not had a lot of governance experience. And one of the people who came in for an interview did not know anything about home care, anything about hospice. And they wanted to hire her because she had on Ferragamo shoes and some Dior dress that they all admired. So that makes an impression, okay? So we can't all afford, or would we wear a Dior dress? But being dressed appropriately, not flashy, but professionally, nicely, that is really, really important. Have your fingernails done, both men and women. Women tend to look at fingernails. Women tend to look at your shoes. If your shoes are scuffed up, if your fingernails are dirty, that leaves a bad impression. Men look at other things, okay? It's sometimes they're very attuned to that stuff and not. Men may look at your tie. They may look at how your hair is cut. They may look at, is your mustache groomed or your beard well groomed? Those types of things. But as a general rule, that's not as a key an issue with men. Now, there are also times, and I have seen this happen on multiple occasions, where a CEO will invite, he's recruiting a senior vice president or chief operating officer. He'll invite them and say, let's have lunch together. Let's meet for breakfast. The CEO will get there early. He'll tip the waiter really, really well and say, I want you to really screw up his order. You're not going to get in trouble. I have already talked to your manager. Everything's going to be fine. Why did he do that? He wanted to see how you would react if you got the wrong order. It's real-time behavior and values interviewing, and people have most people have the good grace and intelligence not to be a jerk. There's some people that just can't help themselves, and so you want to, but be aware that some people will do that. Okay, and also remember that the interview starts if you're driving to the employer's site. As soon as you get on site, the interview's already started. Your interaction with the parking attendant, your interaction with the receptionist in the lobby or the security guard, your interaction with the receptionist. A lot of times they will go back and ask those people, did that person, were they polite? Were they professional? And so that's something that you just need to be aware of. Okay, be aware. It starts when you arrive on site. Keep your energy level up. I have seen people hear something in an interview at a 10:30 slot and really kind of soured their feeling about the job and kind of let down and said, okay, this, I'm not going to take this job, and just kind of let their energy drop off and not as engaged. And they go to lunch and they were kind of down through lunch. And by then the damage is done. That afternoon, when they met with the CEO and realized that was all mistaken, that he heard the wrong thing, he let his energy go and everybody dissed him. And the CEO liked the guy, probably would have hired him, but didn't feel like he could go against his team or didn't want to go against his team because they were so profoundly unimpressed. So you have to keep the energy up. Now, follow-up notes, I get this question all the time. Yes, thank you notes are great. If you have plenty of time, snail mail, handwritten notes. If you have good handwriting, do that. If you don't, you can use, there's something called paperless post that have a really kind of sexy package with an e-card, they'll thank you. It's not very expensive. You can do a regular email, or you can use a video email. Now, video emails, people are still very reluctant to use them, but I tell you, they are getting more and more important to the process. And within 3 to 5 years, they will dominate. Why? Because people remember visuals. Also, keep in mind, a lot of the people you may be interviewing with, if you're looking at senior level positions, you may be interviewing with people who are millennials and Gen X's. And a lot of these people grew up with handheld devices and video. So that's just something to consider. We're putting up a video hopefully soon that will show you how to do that. But this thank you notes, an e-card, something, it's essential to do that. I met somebody once at the airport and I knew her. It was really remarkable. And I said hello, and she was there writing notes. And I said, what are you doing? She said, I'm writing my thank you notes. I did a job interview today, and there's a post box right over there, and I'm going to finish this up, and they're going to all get their mail tomorrow with a local postmark on it. And it was a thank you note. So I think that was really, really impressive. Most management executive job seekers, they fail at the interview. I mean, everybody says, oh, really? Well, yes, they do, because they can hire one and there are probably 40 or 50 to 150 that wanted the job. So most people fail. In the interview, they failed because they did not adequately prepare. They showed up just to answer questions. I keep saying this because I saw it time after time after time in my 27-year career. You got to take it and make it something more than most people say. The interview is this. No, it's not. It's a way for you to sell your value. It's a way for you to convince them that you're the right person for the job. It's the way for you to engage them so they go, we like him, we trust him, we want to hire him over the other people. So you're in a competition. They didn't sell their value. They did not use stories to highlight their strengths. People remember stories. You can give them spreadsheets and all that stuff, and it just fogs their brain. What you need to do is use stories. We have a form called core and categorical, and that's when I was talking about breaking down the job by the categories. In each category, you can think about your strengths. In each strength, think of a story, brief story, even if you have to kind of edit it down, learn it, get ready for it, be able to use it. And sometimes you can use a story in one or two places. Now, you can only use it once in an interview, but a story can add value, can add impact. It can add aha. So people don't use stories. One of the things we focus on is getting people to try to use stories. It's a challenge, but we try. People remember stories. Now, you know what the most common problem is? It's right there in red. They do not close the deal. They do not ask for the job. I had a client once, great guy. He's now retired prematurely, and he had great skill set. There was a big health system that absolutely needed what he had. He was absolutely spot on for it. I was not really involved in his process, but he and I were talking back and forth. He had one of the national Lee Heck Harrison or Lee LHH or one of the other big companies that was advising him. So we were friends and we were just talking back and forth. But I knew what his strengths are. We'd crossed paths in the past, and they needed exactly what he could do, and he had great stories and all of this other stuff. And he didn't get the job. And I asked him, I said, Don, what happened? He said, well, they chose the other guy. I said, okay. And so at the end of the interview, did you close the deal? What was your closing? He said, what do you mean closing? I said, you had the 4 things they were asking for. He said, yes, it was in my resume. I assumed they would just figure it out. Let me tell you this, no disrespect to any of you who are on the employer side, but if you expect the employer to do the math and get the right answer for you, you're making a bad mistake, because they won't. You have to say, let me tell you this. I know that you're facing these 4 challenges. I just want to reemphasize that I have done these things very successfully in the past, and I've done them without a lot of conflict, and I've been able to bring people together. And I want you to know that I think this is a great job, and I would be honored to be the person you select. And I can assure you, you will get my passion, you will get my devotion, and you will have my enthusiasm. That's just something you might want to consider. Now, if you're in a panel interview, this is kind of tricky. Pick a chair where they can see where you can see the room, because eye contact is critical. And if there's a big room, and sometimes people, golly, they put 15 or 20 people in an interview, can go figure. And the reason for that is they've got a bunch of people who want to be involved, but they're probably not great for one-on-one interviews. And so they just kind of throw them in at the end as a catch-all, so they can say, well, they got a chance to participate. And just makes your job a little bit challenging if you're the applicant. But pick a chair where you can see. If it's a big group, okay, then stand up. It's okay in that situation. But you've got to be able to make eye contact with the person asking the question. And as you answer the question, look at that person and then broaden it out and look at the other people and draw them in to your answer. Okay? That's really, really important. Be inclusive. And beware of the complex question. There will be always some guy who stayed up late for 2 weeks coming up with this intricate question that is relevant, but you could spend 30 minutes answering this question. And I've seen this happen too. And you have to be able to compliment the person on asking a great question. Say, this question, you and I could spend 45 minutes in the weeds on this question. But I know a lot of other people want to ask questions. So if you'll permit me to give you an overview, I'll do that. And then if you have additional questions, I'm delighted to get into the weeds with you. Now, everybody in the room knows that you're confident you can answer that question. You're going to give them a summary, and you've now told them you're going to be respectful of their right to ask questions. That's the right way to do it, because guess what? If you get tricked up and you get caught in the weeds and spend 10 or 15 minutes asking questions, and some people are frustrated because they didn't get a chance to ask you their question, it's not going to be the guy who asked that intricate question. They won't blame him. They'll blame you. And that's craziness. So don't let that happen. Be very, very careful about that. Now, preparation is critical for each interview. They cannot be happening events. I'm just going to show up, and I've done a bunch of interviews on this job already, so now I can just coast in. No, you can't. The more higher you go in the interview process, the more intense, the more prepared you have to be. The video interview is key to success. Pay attention to the production details. Sweat the small stuff, okay? And finally, site visits. They're risk and reward. There's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself or walk away empty-handed if you weren't prepared and if you didn't really perform appropriately. Keep in mind, and I know people don't want to hear this, but there are performative aspects to successful interviews. So there you go. Hey, I hope this information's been helpful. Now, if you like this content and you want to share it with other people, please do. You can always go to my channel, flagship channel on YouTube, Guiding Your Career, John G. Self. And it'll be on the live tab, I believe. And both of the last week's session and this week's session are there. So please share them with people that may be going through a job search and you feel might need some help. The next thing I will tell you is that this is in the holiday season. And so if you are a member, we have check the membership page, and we have a benefit for you there. If you are contemplating becoming a member of our organization as part of Your Career community, when you join for $49, you get access to all 11 of our courses, all of our on-demand videos, all of our downloadable forms. You will be getting access to office hours. Now, at the end of this month, office hours will become a members-only event. It's $49 a month. There's no contract. And if you sign up before December 31st, you will get 6 free hours of coaching on the various elements of a job search. That's an $800 value. And so we really believe in this community concept, and we hope that you'll join. And we don't put a contract in place because we want every month we want to earn your confidence. So we hope you'll do that. You visit John G. Self. There's the webpage. There's a little banner on the right-hand side. It says the gateway to the membership. Click it and look it over. If you have any questions, email me at john@johngself.com. I'm happy to answer your questions. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I look forward to seeing you next time here on Office Hours.